Okay, so hello everyone. This is me, Piotr Święcicki, and I'd like to welcome you all. I must say that preparing this webinar, this lecture was an exciting experience for me, and I hope it's going to be an exciting experience for you participating in it as well. So let's get to it. As you know, this webinar is devoted to language mistakes, which are acceptable, but they used to be unacceptable in the past. That's what you could read from the short information about it. And the title is Catch Me If You Can. What we are going to talk about is mainly grammar and grammar-related issues, but not only. And I'd like to start by telling you something about the world of prescriptivists. Actually, the world is full of prescriptivists. These people are generally not bad people, but they are dogmatic about how language should be used, dogmatic about how rules of grammar and pronunciation should be applied. And prescriptivists tell us what we should do about grammar. And actually, there are many prescriptivists in Britain. They seem to be fetishistic about the way they perceive grammar, about how grammar should be taught and used. And actually this started sometime in the 18th and 19th century when British grammarians wanted to standardize the rules of English and make it a bit similar to Latin. All right. So prescriptivism was so strong in the UK, was so strong in the UK that it actually led many people to developing inferiority complexes, you know, about the way they use grammar and pronunciation. Let's take a look at a short quote from a BBC correspondent. The reason why the older generation feel so strongly about English grammar is the way we were severely punished if we didn't obey the rules. One split infinitive, one whack. Two split infinitives, two whacks, and so on. We'll talk about split infinitives by the end of our webinar. I'll tell you what these are if you don't know. But as you can see, the picture was quite depressing. And it was a bit strange, actually, because, you know, standard grammar and pronunciation became the keys to social promotion. You know, for decades of English pedagogy, standard, formal, sophisticated English has been lionized, and informal, regional English was marginalized. It was labeled as sloppy and incorrect. So the country was divided. And the dividing feature was the way people used their language. So prescriptivists somehow instilled in people's minds the idea that, you know, grammar mistakes are some kind of unpardonable sins. Right? How strange? How strange? You know, because if you take a look at Britain, it turns out that there are about 40 dialects of English which coexist, you know, within one huge society. And just to give you a little a picture of what I want to show is this cartoon strip, which you can see right now, and it's a teacher and a schoolboy, and the schoolboy tells the teacher, "Me mum sent a note in, miss," and the note says it's on the plaster, right? It says his arm's broke. So I don't know if you can read between the lines in here, but the point of this anecdote here is that some people in some local accents, instead of my mum, would say me mum, right? And instead of his arm is broken, they would say his arm is broke. And actually, there's nothing wrong or nothing strange about it, because this is how people talk, and that's it. Okay, so actually, there is some good news as well. We are quite lucky, because the world is also full of descriptivists. And descriptivists are people who care about the language as well, but they are less interested in dogmas, and they are more interested in pragmatics of language use. What they do is they try to understand how people use their language, and they try to explain why people use language differently. And in this way, they are far more tolerant than prescriptivists. They say that language change is normal, and that sometimes mistakes become standards, and that this process is just unstoppable. That sometimes non-standard language becomes standard. All right. So let's take a look at what descriptivists would actually regard as not necessarily mistakes, but just instances of language use. Let's take a look at the mistakes that native speakers make. Are they mistakes? That's one question for us to think about. All right, native speaker slips, let's call them. I can definitely imagine talking to a native speaker and hearing something like this. We've been to Canterbury on Saturday. Now, on the one hand, what we are expecting in such a sentence is not present perfect, but simple past, right? It's on Saturday. We've got a time point in here. But if we imagine that the person who just said this sentence changed their mind about what they wanted to say when speaking, this could be actually heard, and there wouldn't be anything, wrong in it if the person just continued and explained what they wanted to say. So sometimes native speakers make little language slips, and there's nothing wrong about it. That's one thing. Another thing is regionalisms and dialects. I bet that many of you have heard about double negatives, that they are banned in English. But what does it mean, banned? If you go to some parts of Britain, you might hear people saying, "I ain't seen nobody," or "We don't need no education." I think you know this line from one of the famous songs, right? Some people would say a language mistake, and others would say, what kind of mistake? This is the way I've been using English since my childhood. So we have to remember about these things as well. Now, another thing is the so-called poetic license, or let's call it creativity. Right, and this is going to be a question to you. I'll have probably three little questions to you. I'll show you three phrases, three sentences. One of them you can see right now. Can I have some table? Now, what's wrong? What's wrong with this line? Can anybody suggest in the chat box, in the question box, what could be improved about it? Okay, so can I have a table? Very good, Monica. Can I have a table? But someone decided to use some table in here. Exactly. I've got some suggestions here that tables are countable, and because they are countable, some is not proper. But if you imagine, being in a meeting room and lots of people have their notes on the table, and you just come in and say, sorry, I've got some stuff here for you. Can I have some table? What you mean is some space on the table. So nothing wrong about it. Okay, another line. And this is an example of the poetic license. Have a look. You might know this line from a song as well. Every little thing she does is magic. Every little thing she do just turns me on. Now, what's strange about this line? Okay, and again, if you could write me a few things in the chat box, that would be great. And I have the answers. Of course, double does, right, is needed here. But Sting, probably the author of this line, decided that do will just sound better than does. And, well, it was his right, as a native speaker to do this. And then it became a song. So mistakes in songs. Okay, we'll have a look at one more example of that. This time, not maybe my favorite musician, Justin Timberlake. You might have heard this line. When you cheated, girl, my heart bleeded, girl. Now, once more, if you could try to spot something strange about this, and Eva, very good. You are the first to notice that the verb to bleed, in the past form, its form is bled, not bleeded, right? So actually what Justin Timberlake did here is he consciously made a grammar mistake. Actually, the type of grammar mistake that small British children are likely to make when they learn how to use irregular verbs, right? Because many of them just turn irregular verbs into regular verbs because they are unconscious of, how grammar really works. Very good, Eva. Okay, so poetic license, creativity. That's another aspect. So what do we should think about all this? I think that it would be a good idea to have a look at some 10 examples of language use, which I'd say 20, 50 years ago would be regarded as serious language mistakes, and now they have just come into everyday use, and probably you'll be surprised by some of those. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one, and actually, all the 10 examples we'll be, looking at them from those two perspectives. From the perspective of a descriptivist who just, hears something interesting and tries to explain how it's used, and from the perspective of a prescriptivist who says, this shouldn't be used this way because English grammar works differently. Okay, so here comes the first example. John and me went to the cinema. Now, have a brief look and please write me, is there anything that a prescriptivist would be likely to change in this sentence? Very good, Pavel. Very good. Thank you for this. A prescriptivist would probably criticize this me pronoun in here, right? A prescriptivist would say that the correct version of this sentence is John and I went to the cinema. That, this sounds better, that this is how grammar works in English. But actually, the fact is that more and more people use phrases like between you and me, not between you and I. And the reason is that it sounds more casual all right? Between you and I sounds pretty formal, so people tend not to use it in everyday communication. Okay, so I wouldn't say that it's a language mistake. It's just something that people use, and that's it. All right, another example, and this time another song-related example. She don't like cocaine. Do you remember this line? Of course you do. What a prescriptivist would notice about this line is that this don't auxiliary verb somehow doesn't match the pronoun she, right? Very good. I've got some answers in the chat box. Very good, guys. She doesn't like cocaine. This is what we learn from the beginning of our adventure with English, that simple present, does and do, and third person singular s. But whose line is this? Eric Clapton's. So are you suggesting that Eric Clapton speaks bad English? Good question, right? Maybe he just used his poetic license, or maybe his parents, or his colleagues used it because actually in Britain and in America, people sometimes use this type of grammar on an everyday basis. My brother don't do drugs anymore. What it means when you hear a sentence like this is that a person who uses it probably didn't receive, and here I'm in doubt of choosing the right word, didn't receive proper education, or good enough education. It's just it's a part of grammar which is socially marked. Working class people don't bother about using third person singular s or do and does. They are very likely to say things like this or like that. She live in a large house. Right? Now, what about us, language learners? I wouldn't say punished by teachers every time we make a mistake like this, but definitely such mistakes are not neglected, right? We as language learners are always reminded of that, the fact that it should be she lives in a large house and not she live in a large house. But if you think about it, if you really think about it, how many times we are corrected, how many times we get corrected by teachers. But such mistakes, do they lead to misunderstanding? Actually, they don't, They don't change the meaning. They just, they might change the perception, the social perception of the person who says something like this. So, I don't know. Maybe in 50 years' time or in 100 years' time, we will be able to say she live in a large house, and nobody will say nothing wrong about it, and that may be true, but for now, it's something that is probably corrected, at least by language teachers. This is our job. All right. Third example, a very popular one, because it became a slogan for one of the companies. I'm loving it. All right. But the thing is that this company actually didn't invent the slogan. People had been using this phrase before. And of course, Marilla, you're right. It should be I love it, right? And why this way? Because teachers tell us that verbs of emotion like love and hate, that they don't get the continuous form, that it's a mistake. But funnily enough, more and more people use the verb loving in this way. For example, I'm loving this book. Imagine a situation in which someone visits you and asks you about a book you've been reading and asks you for an opinion, and you say, "Oh, I'm loving this book. It's great." It's very nicely informal. That's one thing. And the second thing is that the real meaning behind this usage of loving is that you use it to talk about current situations. Imagine this, a tasty burger, right? The one from the advertisement, and the person having it saying, I'm loving it. That's the context. That's the context. So that was a few words about loving something, and now a few words about wanting something. Because actually, if you remember the same lesson about verbs which shouldn't get continuous forms, you'll be probably surprised by this. I'm wanting it. Now, a strange fact is that we can use this phrase. I'm wanting it. People say it. Native speakers use such phrases. But of course, prescriptivists would say, no, it should be I want it. But somehow, wanting something doesn't mean actually the same as wanting something without the ing. What I mean by this is very nicely illustrated by this example. Are you wanting a muffin, Peter? Of course, we could say, would you like a muffin, Peter? Or would you like to have a muffin, Peter? Right? We could use all those nice and sophisticated, polished ways of asking. But this way of asking someone about something is just less direct, and somehow it's just it became trendy. People liked it, and more and more people use it. So I think it is becoming a part of the language as it is used by native speakers as well. All right, and the fifth example that I've got for you is equally interesting, I think. Have a look at this one. And a question to you, as usual, if you could spot something wrong about it. Less people called us. I've heard this many times, and every time I heard this, I thought, shouldn't this be said in a different way, because there's something wrong about it. So guys, can you see any inconsistency of grammar here? Less people called us. If you remember what we said about countable and uncountable nouns, exactly, Dorota, right? It should be. I think we could say it should be. It should be fewer, right? Fewer people called us, because people are countable, and less goes with uncountable nouns. So a prescriptivist would say fewer people called us. That's the way we should say this sentence. But funnily, everywhere in the internet, in television, we hear, and on the streets as well, we can hear people saying, "I've got less problems than I used to have." Now, problems are countable, so why isn't it fewer? Actually, it's a big question why people decide to like this form more than the previous one. Maybe it just sounds better. Maybe it's a big maybe, actually. But this is how language develops, right? So less is just becoming more and more popular, and well, a prescriptivist won't accept it and will keep correcting you, and a descriptivist will say, okay, this is how people express themselves, and it's quite interesting. Okay, now the sixth example. The sixth example is it's not a big language mistake from the point of view of a prescriptivist, I'd say, but it's an interesting example in itself. Somebody dropped their keys. It could be someone's dropped their keys. It could be somebody's dropped their keys. It's not a big thing in here, but an interesting word in that sentence is there, right? Now, somebody and there. It's a case of language use which, for a prescriptivist, would be probably acceptable, but only in informal contexts, because prescriptivists would like us to actually say something like this: somebody's dropped his or her keys, especially in writing, in the written form. Okay, this kind of sexist language, right? Actually, his or her is not sexist language. What would be sexist would be somebody's dropped his keys, right? And all the similar cases in which we use words like a person, anybody, whoever, each person. It's quite similar to what we have in Polish, right? There's a tendency to use masculine pronouns in here. If somebody calls, take his name, please. His or her name, please. His slash her name, please. It's a big question which form is more economical, and actually it turns out that the more economical form and the form which is the least sexist is there, but it's not good grammar in a way. But it's something that that people more and more use. Actually for decades. It's nothing very recent. All right. Now let's take a look at the 7th example, and this one is a bit more glaring because we're also used to getting corrected by teachers every time we make a mistake like this. The time went very quick. Of course, Eva, you are right. The time went very quickly, right? We need an adverb in here and not an adjective. And I'm glad you've noticed this, Monica. So is it permissible? Can we do this? Well, actually, a descriptivist would say, more and more people use the word quick as an adverb and as an adjective, and you can hear native speakers saying, "I'll get back as quick as I can." It's just informal style. It's a form which just became again trendy and popular, and it is in a way a language mistake, but a language mistake which is repeated by thousands of people, and because they are native speakers, they've got their right to make it, don't they? All right, and the 8th example. And before I'll tell you something more about the 8th example, I just want to say a few words to the people who are very active on the chat, like Pavel, for example, and let me see a few other people who have been supplying me with plenty of other examples, of non-standard English use. Thank you for this. I'll try to respond to some of your suggestions in my maybe next webinars. All right, but now it's time for the 8th example here, and here it is. Who did you sleep with? Okay, a standard question for a descriptivist, but a prescriptivist would say, there are at least 2 things which I would like to correct in here. The first one would be whom. Very good, Eva. But the more serious problem is that sentences in English shouldn't end with prepositions. And And it's a concept which goes back to the 18th and 19th century, you know, those crazy grammarians who wanted to standardize everything. So a prescriptivist would say, this is how you should say it. With whom did you sleep? And this is perfect. But funnily enough, real people, real language users are more likely to say, who did you sleep with? And that's it. So sentences like, who have you been sleeping with? Who are you waiting for? Are definitely more common than for who are you waiting? Or with whom have you been sleeping? Right? So nobody, maybe nobody is too strong, but real people, you know, just everyday language users, they don't care about this rule, and they just end sentences with prepositions because it's just easier, I guess. All right, and here comes the ninth case. The ninth case is very interesting, and I'm interested in the fact, you know, I'm just interested if you could notice what's grammatically inconsistent about this phrase. There is lots of apples in the box. Of course, Dorota and of course Marilla and Monica and many others, you've spotted this very well. A prescriptivist, and maybe you are prescriptivists, would say that because there are apples, it's plural, then we should use are as the plural version of the verb to be. But again, if you take a look at the internet, if you take a look at the way people use language on an everyday basis, you can hear sentences such as these. And I have taken these examples actually from a grammar book that is not a prescriptivist grammar book, but it is a descriptivist grammar book. And this is what I found there. Here's your keys. Where's those books I lent you? There's some children at the door. Now, how should we interpret such cases? The answer is pretty straightforward. It's just informal style, because on the one hand, these are kind of, you know, grammar issues, but on the other hand, this is how people speak, and again, probably because that's a faster way of expressing yourself, and that's natural in language development. You know, everything tends to get simplified. Okay, and my final example, the one that actually we kind of started with. I don't know if you remember this quote from the BBC correspondent that, you know, every time he made this mistake when he was at school, he would get a whack from a teacher. You know, teachers back then, they used to have canes with which they used to punish their students, and it's this one. Actually, it's an example of a language problem here, which you might associate with a film or a TV show that used to be popular in the 60s in America, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Now, sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Sounds like, you know, the opening line of the film, Captain Kirk, you know, Captain's Log. But a prescriptivist would definitely correct the position of the word boldly, of the adverb in here. And why? Why is this Star Trek famous phrase wrong? Because infinitives, and to go is an infinitive, shouldn't be split. So the correct version of this would be to go boldly where no man has gone before. It wouldn't be the same Star Trek, would it? The the actual problem here is that according to those 18th, 19th, and also 20th century grammarians, those prescriptivists, because Latin infinitives couldn't be slipped, so we shouldn't do the same with the English ones. But actually, it's an unrealistic rule. It's an unrealistic rule because people prefer saying he began to slowly get up from the floor. Rather than he slowly began to get up from the floor. Or actually, I take it back. It's not that people prefer. They just sometimes would say he slowly began to get up from the floor, and on another occasion they would say he began to slowly get up from the floor. It's probably not very important where we put the word slowly in here. And it's the same with the second example. I'd really like to understand you, or I'd like to really understand you. Slight change of meaning, maybe here and there, but on the whole, there's nothing wrong about split infinitives. So, you see, you might be wondering, which row should you take? Maybe you're thinking that my talk was a talk of a descriptivist, I'm sorry to disappoint you, because if you knew me better, if you knew how much I correct my son's poszłem, you would see a different picture of me. Now, but why do I do this? Why do I correct my son's poszłem, or poszłeś? Is this so serious? Do I want him to belong to the group of well-educated Poles, while 90% of his schoolmates in Grochów and a large proportion of his teachers say poszłem, So I don't know. It's a big question, actually, which I keep asking myself every day. And I bet that among us here there are also a few language anarchists, who say, well, I'm a native speaker of Polish. I can do with Polish whatever I want. Language belongs to me. I've got the poetic license, just like Sting and Eric Clapton and Justin Timberlake, right? And it's your right. It's your right as well. So an everyday language user. What does that all mean to a person like that? Should we care about all these descriptivists and prescriptivists and how language is used? Well, I don't know. It's actually a big question that we have to face. My own answer to this is that I try to be. And trying is not the right word. Actually, I think I am a bit of both. A bit of a prescriptivist and a descriptivist, and a bit of a language anarchist and just an everyday language user. And the thing I know is that when I'm teaching English, I, of course, correct my students, because I want them to use a certain standard that would be recognizable. But I also try to be aware of the fact that language, and especially English, is changing. International English, all the nationalities that use English and which have adopted English and which change the rules of it are still there, and it's all very fluid, and something that we have to accept, I guess. So don't worry about making language mistakes, because you're not alone. And I think that this is all I wanted to share with you today. And I'd like to thank you very much for spending these 40 minutes with me. These are the sources I have used when I was preparing for that webinar, and a few photo credits. And well, I can just say a big thank you to you all, and thank you for your participation. I just have a short announcement. In tomorrow's correspondence with you guys, all the people who participated, we'll be trying out a new feature, a short quiz on some of the information you've learned today, an online quiz which you might appreciate. So so thank you again, and I'll just hand over my headset to Maciek, who's got some important information for you. All right, so please stay tuned. Maciek is taking over.
Dziękuję bardzo, Piotrze. Dziękuję Państwu za udział w naszym webinarium. Na sam koniec chcielibyśmy Państwa zachęcić, może Państwo będą chcieli wziąć udział w zajęciach w wirtualnych klasach. Są to zajęcia znacząco różniące się od webinariów, które Państwo już doskonale znają. Webinaria to jest raczej taki wykład, gdzie po jednej stronie jest lektor, a po drugiej znaczna liczba kursantów, natomiast w wirtualnych klasach takiej różnicy nie ma. Zazwyczaj są to zajęcia indywidualne albo w bardzo małej grupie, gdzie lektor z kursantami może zachować pełną interakcję. Takie zajęcia szczególnie polecamy osobom, które mieszkają w dosyć trudnych lokalizacjach i zajęcia z lektorem lub w małej grupie byłyby niemożliwe dla takiej osoby. Takie zajęcia również polecamy osobom, które muszą uczestniczyć w zajęciach językowych, najlepiej w małej grupce, na przykład z osobami z tej samej firmy, ale z innego miasta. Takie zajęcia są bardzo pożądane przez wiele firm. I oczywiście takie zajęcia mogą być realizowane o praktycznie każdej porze dnia. Bardzo często realizowane takie zajęcia są wieczorem. Tutaj Państwo w tej chwili widzą na swoich ekranach, jak wygląda panel takiej wirtualnej klasy. Jest wspólna tablica, słuchacze nawzajem się widzą i słyszą, mamy okienko czatu, więc zachowana jest pełna interakcja z lektorem. Możliwe jest wyświetlanie plików, wideo, mp3. Jest wspólna tablica przygotowana również przez lektora z ćwiczeniami, którą można na bieżąco uzupełniać. Więc jeżeli są Państwo zainteresowani wirtualnymi klasami, to bardzo prosimy o kontakt, zarówno osoby prywatne, jak i firmy. wirtualnaklasa.kromko.pl. Pod tym adresem znajdziecie Państwo zdecydowanie więcej informacji na ten temat. Wracając jeszcze do naszego webinarium, tak jak powiedział Piotr, wyślemy do Państwa jutro taki krótki test, quiz, gdzie będziecie mogli Państwo sobie powtórzyć niektóre zagadnienia, które były na dzisiejszym webinarium poruszone. No, wyślemy także Państwu link z nagraniem dzisiejszego webinarium oraz taki PDF dodatkowo ze słownictwem. To już jest, widzę, że tutaj pojawiło się, zdaje się, pytanie, to ja jeszcze oddam na chwilkę głos Piotrowi.
Dzięki Maćku i dzięki za właśnie tutaj kilka pytań, które się pojawiły. Teraz jest też taki moment, kiedy ja bardzo chętnie właśnie na tego typu pytania, które gdzieś tam się Państwu kołatały po głowie, mogę się tymi pytaniami teraz zająć. I pytanie tutaj dotyczy tego, jak angielski amerykański, angielski brytyjski są widziane tutaj przez tych deskryptywistów i tych drugich preskryptywistów. Tak w skrócie to pytanie opisałem, bo ono jest całkiem długie. Ja bym powiedział tak, że ta amerykańska wersja angielskiego, oczywiście znów od tak naprawdę już 20, 30, 40 tak naprawdę lat, jako właśnie wersja taka najbardziej popularna, wersja biznesu, prawda, który się uprawia na całym świecie, tak naprawdę ma olbrzymi wpływ na to, jak mówią Brytyjczycy. I Brytyjczycy wiele razy tak jakby sami tutaj się na tym łapią, że zamiast takiej właśnie tradycyjnej brytyjskiej wersji jakiegoś słowa lub jakiegoś wyrażenia, a nawet jeśli chodzi o wymowę, używają właśnie słowa brytyjskiego albo jakiejś formy, przepraszam, słowa amerykańskiego albo jakiejś formy amerykańskiej. Więc to jest rzeczywiście bardzo ciekawy element. I jeszcze mam jedno pytanie o to, czy to tylko gramatyka dotyczy tego, o czym mówiliśmy dzisiaj? Tak naprawdę przede wszystkim gramatyka. Ta taka manichejska, dualistyczna tutaj walka deskryptywistów z preskryptywistami, również trochę wymowa i ortografia, prawda? Bo to są takie cechy języka, które po prostu podlegają największym zmianom, jeśli chodzi o odejścia od standardów, prawda? Albo o jakieś regionalne aspekty, które potem stają się globalne. Słownictwo żyje trochę swoim życiem. Także bardzo dziękuję za uwagę jeszcze raz. Zapraszam do przeczytania tych informacji z maila jutrzejszego. No i pozdrawiam, do usłyszenia. Dzięki bardzo.